Hello everybody, I'm back with another video for you today, and we have some more exciting reveals to talk about. I want to discuss them as I always do, and really analyze some of these cards, but long story short, I'm very excited for the expansion having seen some of these cards. I was a little bit hesitant before seeing these, but I think these are really the best card reveals we've had so far. A lot of very interesting mechanics, a lot of cards with a lot of keywords on them, and of course some fan favourite cards. Namely Eredin making a return to the game. So we'll get into talking about that. Let's jump in. Here we have Lieutenant von Herst. It is a Firesworn unit for Syndicate, as many of the new Syndicate cards are. Here's a 4 strength unit, 1 armor, 8 provisions. Hoard 5 at the end of your turn. Spawn a Firesworn Zealot in this row. Fee 1, transform a Firesworn Zealot into a Flaming Rose Footman. So allowing you to spawn the 2 strength Zealots and transform them into 3 strength footmen at the cost of 1 coin. So allowing you to effectively generate 1 coin every time you, 1 point every time you spend a coin, and also with a Hoard ability that's going to generate 2 points per turn. So I really like that there's another Hoard synergy in the game. I think that's going to be very nice in terms of potentially enabling something like Hidden Cash to be good in the future. Maybe not just yet, because there's not that many great Hoard cards, but this is certainly one that might, be useful, especially if you're wanting to do Firesworn things, spawn a lot of units, and potentially this is a decent option for, just any deck really. It's just a decent value card. It acts as a spender as well as an engine, which is a very rare and pretty useful, thing to have. It can effectively be worth 3 points per turn if you're happy to spend money on this. But yeah, I'm not sure this will see play in decks that don't care too much about Firesworn synergy, but in decks that do, this could very well be a good inclusion, and I like that it's kind of looking quite playable but also not too strong, because you never want an engine like this to be too powerful, otherwise it's just very annoying to deal with. So yeah, you can shut this down quite easily with damage, or just by, locking, poisoning, whatever it might be, but yeah, I think it's a pretty decent card. It's definitely sometimes a downside that it doesn't boost itself or go tool with its engine value, but it's also sometimes an upside for the opponent being able to kill it. But yeah, let's go to the next card. So we have Roderick de Wett, another Syndicate Firesworn card, 4 for 7 with 1 armor again, and it has Veil with Zeal and Order melee row locked. Spawn a Flaming Rose Footman in this row. At the end of your turn, if Order is not used, gain 1 coin. This is a really cool ability. I don't know if we've ever seen a card function like this where it has an effect and another effect if you don't use that effect. I think that's really quite nice design and some design space that hasn't been used very much. So I'm really happy to see that here. You're basically risk rewarding with this card. You're deciding, do I think the opponent has a removal or movement of some kind for my Roderick? If I do, then I'm probably going to just instantly use his Order ability with that Zeal, and if not, then I'm going to keep him around and try to be greedy with this. So this card seems pretty good. It's just baseline a 7 for 7, assuming you instantly activate his effect, playing around the opponent having removal, and if not, then this can get quite crazy amount of value. In a longish round, this could be, very easily 12 or so points for 7 provisions, which is really good, and it's also gaining coins, which is typically quite a nice ability to have on a card, just to translate coins into extra points, because quite often a coin is worth a little bit more than actually a point. So yeah, this card looks very good, and some really interesting mind games will go on if you do end up playing this. Worth noting, you can't lock it because it's got Veil, so movement is going to be your main way to shut this card down. If you go for damage and you don't finish him off, they're just going to click his Order ability, and you're not going to be feeling very good about that. So yeah, very nice design here. I mean, it might not be played because it's, potentially underwhelming if they have movement, and if even if it goes off, it's not like game winning, but it is a 7 provision card, so that's kind of what you would expect. But yeah, very cool design, and maybe another playable card, particularly for the Firesworn decks with that Flaming Rose Footman coming down. Next we have another Firesworn synergistic card, and I really like the design of this card. I'm not sure it will be the strongest card ever. It is a 4 strength for 4 provisions, which is usually quite bad because you want about 6 points at least from a 4p card. It does have 2 armor though, and it does have immunity, so you can't deal with this with any targeted removal, any targeted effects, unless you purify it with Siegfried, but that's probably not going to happen really. You can Ignite, you can Scorch it, you can Eredin it. So these are the main ways to shut this kind of thing down, or just deal with the Firesworn tokens that this unit will effectively consume before you get around to playing this. But yeah, this is destroying all Firesworn tokens in this row, boosting by the sum of their power. So it acts as a way to gain all of the points into this safe body with the immunity. Obviously it's a bit risky against Igni and Scorch and things like that, so it's again, risk-reward with this card. Could end up being a bit frustrating to run into those things. But I really like that it's allowing you to fill your board up more, so you can potentially negate the limitation of having however many units you're allowed in the row. I really like that, because that's something a Swarm deck will often be limited by, and this potentially allows you to play around that if you want to do that. Not sure if it will be very good. We'll have to see how much and how efficiently the Firesworn decks will swarm out. Firesworn and Swarm all sounds very similar. Tongue twisters are there, but yeah, either way, I really like the design of this card. It's incentivizing you to play bronzes later in the game when you're playing the rest of your power, and that's something the game really lacks. There aren't a lot of bronzes that want to be played later in the game. Usually you just want to throw away 4 provisions in round 1 or mulligan them away. So I like that this card is incentivizing the opposite of that. So very nice design on that one. And here we have Herkja Drummond. And she is basically the equivalent for Skellige of Roderick. I mean, they're almost copy and paste. It's a little bit like that Office meme, right? What's the difference between these two pictures? Well, they're the same picture. But yeah, 4 strength again, 7 provisions, 1 armor, so pretty much identical. Again, a Veil, a Zeal, an Order ability melee locked, split 3 damage randomly between enemy units on a row. At the end of your turn, if Order is not used, damage a random enemy unit by 1. So rather than a Firesworn and Coin synergy, we have just damage synergy. Obviously going to be a nice little engine potentially for greatswords. You're already running a lot of melee and ranged locked units, so movement you don't care so much about. Definitely playing this card could be a real pain if the opponent has used a lot of their movement on your boats already. And yeah, really nice value with greatswords. You're able to play a greatsword and immediately deal the damage, which can potentially allow you to boost the greatsword out of removal range. So I'm definitely seeing some nice synergy for greatswords here. I think this card may very well be played in greatswords. I think if I were playing greatswords, I would put this card in at the moment. It just seems pretty good. We'll see if there are more cards that are greatsword synergistic, but right now this is probably just being thrown in a greatsword deck. So again, I like the design. It's almost identical to Roderick. I wish they were a little bit more creative in terms of maybe making this a bit lower strength but higher provisions, or higher damage output and synergies, or whatever it would be. Even just a bit of a change in terms of the points. Maybe it's 3 strength, 2 armor, maybe it's 8 provisions. Just something to make it feel a bit more different. I'm not a huge fan of just copy-pasting cards across factions and changing them based on their Unger mechanic, their specific category or whatever, but whatever. It's a cool card and I like the design of both of these, so I'm not going to complain too much. Anyway, next we have Drummond Beserker. Skellige Bronze, 5 for 5, at the end of your turn damage yourself and a random enemy unit by 1. And Berserk 2, transform into a Bear Abomination. This card has a crazy ceiling. Potential of 9 for 5, 9 points if he is able to shoot 3 times and transform into a bear at 6 strength. But probably the opponent's going to remove him, so he's in that case just kind of acting as a second or an alternative to Ancrate, or Dimon Longship I should say. It's cool that he works very similar to the Longship. Drummond, actually what am I talking? Drummond and Dimon are different. And I'm pretty sure Dimon is the Longship, but whatever. Names aside, oops, we're now zooming in. No, this card is pretty solid. I think this will actually see play in decks that already want to run Longship, very possibly. Especially since it's a warrior. I should have said, by the way, this card is also a warrior. If you're going for warrior synergies, then this card's kind of a no-brainer alongside, Wild Boar and things like that. Definitely a lot of value, especially if you're able to play multiple engines and have them struggle to remove him and then get that Berserk trigger. 9 for 5 is a lot. That's like very good value on just kind of a standalone, no synergies required bronze. So it's sometimes hard to get the value. You're going to hit armor and things, but I think this card is very playable and I do like the design of it. Allows a bit of counterplay, but it is very strong as well. And the main man himself now, Eredin Breakglass. Oh, Eredin, as we all know him to be. 5 strength, 10 provisions. I'm very happy to see him back in the game, and with an effect that I think has been suggested. Well, I've talked about it before, like, why not just have Eredin spawn Frost? That's kind of what he does, right? That's what Eredin and the Wild Hunt are known for. All this Frost synergy, that kind of all got gutted with Homecoming. We lost all of those synergies. Before, it used to be Wild Hunt Hounds playing Frost from your deck, and Wild Hunt Warriors synergizing with Frost, being kind of immovable, you know, the frontline troops of the Frosty Legions. But we've got Spawn Frost on an enemy row for 2 turns, with a dominance effect of increased damage dealt by Frost by 1. So allowing this to come down as an 8 for 10. Worth keeping in mind, Frost has also been changed, so it no longer damages the lowest enemy unit, but instead the highest, which synergizes with Dominance, because you're going to be taking out the higher strength units, getting your Dominance keyword kind of more activated. It does mean you're going to struggle with removing lower strength units, which is something that Frost is very good at, or has been very good at. That's a key reason to play something like Avalak, but, you know, Avalak's still available, just with Fog, for that option to, you know, remove low strength units. So worth keeping in mind, you're not going to have super great removal capabilities with this Frost as you would have in the past. It's going to act like Fog effectively. But yeah, still very strong. You can potentially get 12 points from this, 12 for 10, and a potential engine on the board. So this card, I really like the design. I think it's very, very strong, possibly. Well, we'll see. Really depends if you're wanting to play more Frost synergies and Wild Hunt cards and things like that. But that leads me on to Red Riders, and this is another pretty nice monster card. 6 provisions special, and choose one. Spawn Frost in an enemy row for 4 turns, spawn Frost on both enemy rows for 2 turns. So one thing to note is they've also changed Frost to be not just always a 4-turn timer effect, but nowadays it's actually going to specify how long the Frost is working for. And I love that change. That's another really good rework to weather and how it can function. And it's going to allow the balancing of weather to be a lot more kind of honed in and specific, and allow a lot more different options in terms of how weather effects work. So I really like this change. It might seem like a small thing, but it allows you to print cards that, you know, for example, a bronze card that spawns Frost on the enemy row for 1 turn. Instead of spawning it, you know, if it spawns it for 4 turns every time, that's quite an oppressive and powerful ability, so you wouldn't be able to put it on many cards. But since you've now been able to split up the Frost and how long it lasts for, I think that's going to be really helpful for introducing new cards with synergies involving Frost. So yeah, that's really great. And this card, obviously a flexible Frost, so if the opponent's going 1 row, you play it there. If they're going 2 rows, you play it on the back and the front. So great synergy with Eredin as well, potentially getting you an extra 4 points from that Eredin, or from the Red Riders, however you look at it, and a standalone kind of an 8 for 6 potentially. So that's pretty good as far as 6 provision cards go, and it has some kind of uninteractive element to it. You might be end up playing some kind of no unit monster deck. I know Ocean Mud will probably be doing that with his Potion Mud stuff at some point. So that'll be interesting, but yeah, probably a decent card. We'll see what other Wild Hunt support there is. If there's a fair amount of, you know, Frost synergy and Elf or Wild Hunt synergy, then I think this archetype could be looking pretty decent, and maybe a new way to play monsters, or to at least sprinkle in to your monster decks with some of this weather synergy. And yeah, I'm really hopeful for the future in terms of other weather effects and being introduced to different cards. I think there's a lot of potential there, and I hope that's the next direction the game goes in, is with some fleshing out of weather, you know, cards that spawn torrential rain, and the fog, of course, and maybe even other row effects, and then cards that also interact with that and remove it, or, you know, remove a certain number of turns of Frost or whatever. A bit more interactability, and all of that will be good in no time, I'm sure. But yeah, you've got to be a bit careful, because if there's no answer to weather, or no efficient answer to weather, then that could become a very powerful thing. So you've got to be a bit careful not to imbalance the game in that way. And last but not least, we have Forest Protector. God, the arts in this game are just so great, aren't they? I mean, we forgot to note that, but just, God, look at this stuff. It's really, it's just of the highest quality, absolutely. Anyway, that being said, Forest Protector, a Treant for Scoia'tael, a 5 for 11. Deploy, play a bronze nature card from your graveyard. So the obvious target for this right now is Nature's Rebuke, a 12 for 11 if you take that, because it's going to boost this Treant after you kill a unit. So yeah, pretty damn nice piece of removal. 12 for 11 is decent, and 5 damage is nothing to scoff at. Now, very worth noting that Symbiosis is the new keyword for Scoia'tael, meaning when you play a nature card, you're going to spawn a Treant with strength equal to the number of Symbiosis units you have in play. So that's kind of the key thing here. This isn't just a 12 for 11, this is going to synergize with some of the other cards, and with that Symbiosis keyword that's coming for Scoia'tael. I think that's where most of their new cards are going to find kind of their abilities and stuff, is going to be with Symbiosis, nature cards, etc. We might even see a 6 provision nature special. We've seen one for Skellige and monsters, so wouldn't be too surprised if we see that. And this obviously has great synergy there, going to spawn you a Treant and Symbiosis synergy, and yeah, already looking like a pretty strong card that you might already throw in a Scoia'tael deck or two. So yeah, all in all, some really exciting card reveals here, some very playable cards with some really interesting effects and synergies, and some introduction of old mechanics but revitalizing them and reworking them in a way that I think is very, very nice. And just some general kind of very good design decisions, I think, with some of these other cards. So I'm very impressed by this. I was a little bit worried before, as I said, that everything was going to feel a bit generic and nothing too exciting, but actually I'm very hyped for this expansion, and I think this will shake things up quite considerably. That being said, thanks a lot for watching, guys. Do remember to subscribe, of course, for more videos as always, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.